Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to you and the ranking member and to all the members of the committee for giving me the opportunity to testify today about my bill, the bipartisan Keep America's Waterfronts Working Act. Throughout my time in Congress, I have advocated for the needs and priorities of coastal communities and those who use our working waterfronts. I'm grateful to have the platform to discuss this bill with you today. Like me, I know many members of this committee hear regularly from their constituents who make a living on the water. Whether they are boat builders on the West Coast, recreational fishing guides in the Gulf of Mexico, or commercial fishermen and aquaculture business owners in New England, the refrain is always the same. Water-dependent businesses from coast to coast need our help. They want us to preserve access to the working waterfronts that make their livelihoods possible and keep our coastal economies thriving. Last year, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, reported that the ocean and Great Lakes economy directly supports more than 3 million jobs and contributes more than $350 billion to the nation's gross domestic product. But this infusion of revenue, jobs, and business opportunities will only continue if we invest in the nation's coastal infrastructure. In Maine, our lobster industry alone contributes $1 billion per year to the state economy and supports 4,000 jobs throughout the state. This is on top of the dockside value of lobsters brought home by fishermen, which totaled $484 million in 2018. Maine's aquaculture industry is growing rapidly. Right now, it generates $138 million for our state's economy each year, as well as $56 million in wages and nearly 1,100 jobs. Boat building is another of our state's oldest industry, and it is directly tied to the success of the coastal economy. Maine has nearly 80 boat building businesses employing approximately 1,400 workers, with wages totaling about $59 million a year. Our fishermen and seafood harvesters in Maine are deeply concerned about the future of their industries. They see climate-driven changes in our oceans every day. Shifting species ranges, shrinking fish stocks, acidifying waters, heightened storm surges, the list goes on. When fishermen can't rely on their past experiences and hard-earned knowledge of their local waters, it makes fishing much more difficult. Unfortunately, fishermen and other traditional waterfront users are now coming up against another challenge. Across the country, working waterfronts are rapidly disappearing under pressure from incompatible development. And once our working waterfronts are gone, they are almost always gone forever. When our fishermen have to grapple with losing fishing wharves, seafood processing and auction facilities, and other essential infrastructure in addition to challenges of fishing in our changing oceans, it puts the survival of our coastal communities and economies at risk. It's up to elected leaders to support the industries that our coastal communities depend on. At the state level in Maine, we created the Working Waterfront Access Protection Program in 2005, which has funded projects at 25 working waterfronts since its building. This year, 6 projects have received grant funding throughout the program. Among the recipients are fishing co-ops, coastal municipalities, and fishing wards. At the federal level, we can support the great work that the states are already doing by giving them access to funding and other resources. We don't need to duplicate that effort, but we can provide more resources and tools for our state to preserve coastal economies. With this in mind, I've been proud to work across the aisle with my colleagues, including Congressman Whitman of Virginia, to create bipartisan solutions that can work for all of our coastal communities. This bill, the Keeping America's Waterfronts Working Act of 2019, would amend the Coastal Zone Management Act to create competitive loan and matching grant programs dedicated to working waterfront preservation and improvement projects, as well as preserving public access to the coast. $12 million would be authorized for each program. The bill would let states allocate funding to eligible local governments, nonprofits, and fishing co-ops. We chose to include both grant and loan funding sources after discussion with local stakeholders who explained the benefits that both kinds of financing options would have for them. It would also establish a Working Waterfronts Task Force within the Department of Commerce to identify the needs of coastal communities related to changing environment, marketplace pressures, trade barriers, and other threats. The programs contained in this bill are voluntary, meaning each state can choose to act on this opportunity or not. It's been gratifying to hear so many of the proposals to solve the problems facing our coastal communities at today's hearing. I strongly believe that working waterfronts are an integral part of our coastal communities and traditions, and we must do our part to make sure they survive into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.